About BRICS, you know, the BRICS states are like 6 of them.
It is founding members Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, who are joined by Egypt, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and Ethiopia. More than 30 countries have expressed interest in joining BRICS.
Russia and China, in particular, have recognized the geopolitical advantages of breaking away from dollar dependence.
President-elect Trump is vowing to impose 100% tariffs on BRICS nations unless they commit to not developing a new currency.
Russian authorities are keen to promote the idea of a unified BRICS financial system to rival the dominant US dollar.
Most experts are skeptical that the bloc can create a new global reserve currency in the short term.
Nation. Well, if they're a BRICS nation, you know what a BRICS nation is? We'll figure it out.
Wow. I hope everyone enjoyed the theatrics of that video. Our goal was to capture your attention early, but more importantly, we hope to have piqued your interest. Good morning, BAP colleagues and friends. Today, we'll dive into the fascinating world of BRICS. Not the building material, of course, but the coalition that aimed to increase cooperation among its members, as well as to increase political influence on the global stage. The BRICS nations have big plans. They're building a new payment system that will parallel SWIFT, as well as a new digital currency aimed to challenge the dominance of the US dollar. But how will these initiatives impact the transaction banking industry? How did we get here? And frankly, why should we care? We'll look to answer these questions in our presentations today, as well as trying to add insights into both the opportunities and challenges that comes with these initiatives. But before we dive in, I think it's important for us to understand the history of BRICS and the goal that this bloc initially aimed to achieve. So with that, I would like to ask everyone to take out their phone for a quick Slido poll. We're going to do a quick knowledge check. As of 2025, how many countries have joined BRICS? And as the results roll in, I'm going to pass the mic over to my colleague Olivia to give you guys a little bit of background on BRICS itself.
Thanks, Kev. So I'm going to start with a fun fact. Although BRICS was officially established in 2009, the acronym itself comes from a research paper written in 2001 by the then head of global economic research at Goldman Sachs, Jim O'Neill. Before we move forward, if you answered 10 to our initial question, I'm happy to confirm you passed the test. So what really is BRICS? Well, if you didn't catch it in our video, it stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And it's a formed alliance with a common purpose for multilateral cooperation to address key global issues affecting member countries. With this, of course, comes opportunities and challenges, which leads us to our next Slido question. We'd like to get your thoughts on what you think the biggest challenge for BRICS gaining traction with the global community is. And while you answer, Genta is going to take a deeper dive into one of BRICS initiatives.
Thanks, Olivia. So one of the main initiatives of BRICS is BRICS Bridge, which is a financial messaging system. It was announced in 2023, and it is still on the early stages of development. This system could potentially be based on a blockchain technology. A key milestone was reached on February last year when BRICS central banks agreed to start working on alternative financial infrastructure. However, no official launch date has been set yet, and most of the BRICS countries still use SWIFT for their transaction. The main goals of BRICS Bridge include enhancing financial sovereignty, lowering transaction costs, and supporting trade in local currencies. While it aims for inclusivity, there are also challenges such as differences in technology, legal framework, and geopolitical risk that could potentially slow its progress. Now, Carlos will tell us more what is the long-term and short-term impact of the BRICS Bridge.
Thank you, Genta. Regarding the poll, we see that a majority of you think that sanctions and threats from the West are the biggest problem for BRICS, which is indeed one of their main current issues. We have asked 185 transaction bankers and industry members about BRICS Bridge, and a majority of them believe that BRICS Bridge and SWIFT can coexist and have a complementary relationship rather than a negative one. Market trust and confidence, the global economic conditions, and the regulatory environment will be the main factors for BRICS Bridge to become a successful initiative. The system will likely function parallel to SWIFT. For banks, that would mean interoperability and operational fragmentation challenges, driving up IT and compliance cost. US and American banks in particular may face regulatory pressures not to interact with a payment system set up by BRICS due to sanctions concerns. In the long term, the success of this initiative will linger on the integration with the existing non-Western payment systems, such as China's CIPS and corporate adoption. However, market trust barriers are expected to remain significant. Central banks could play a very significant role on BRICS Bridge if the payment system follows the example set up by mBridge, the payment systems created by the Bank of International Settlements in 2024. Now, my colleague Yang is going to speak to us about the unit, the second BRICS initiative we have been focusing on.
Thank you, Carlos. Now let's maybe switch the gear a little bit from the payment system to the currency. So besides BRICS Bridge, one of the ambitious proposals under discussion by BRICS nations is the creation of a new reserve currency named the unit. But unlike traditional reserve currencies, the unit is expected to function as a unit of account rather than a traditional fiat currency. As for why the unit is being pursued, here's a few reasons. So first of all, the unit may potentially reduce dollar dependency, may potentially enhance economic sovereignty, may potentially facilitate intra-BRICS trade, and may potentially challenge Western financial dominance. Now, both BRICS Bridge and the unit may sound very fascinating and promising. However, when people took our survey and were asked about whether the proposed BRICS Bridge and the unit will help BRICS countries de-dollarize, the answers we received are actually not as optimistic as you may expect. So we may start wondering, what's the unit's actual impact and how will the unit evolve tomorrow versus a decade from now? To unpack this, I'm going to hand it over to my teammate, James.
Thank you, Yang. As of today, the BRICS currency, the unit, it's more of a geopolitical statement than a functional currency instrument. In the short term, we expect that Western institutions would be hesitant to transact in the BRICS currency due to sanctions risks. However, we could see the unit being used as a special purpose instrument, for example, a tokenized asset to transact and select trade transactions. In the long run, the success of the unit will be contingent on two things. The first being whether or not the BRICS nations can come to a political alignment, and the second, whether or not the unit itself gains global adoption. If this was to happen, we could see the emergence of trade corridors where the unit is used alongside of the US dollar, the euro, and RMB in select transactions. And if this was to happen, international banks would need to hold a portion of their reserves in the unit. However, when we interviewed our industry experts, they were skeptical that the US dollar could rival, the unit could rival the US dollar or the euro as a global reserve currency. Moreover, there were concerns around convertibility and whether or not the unit would make it out of niche transactions. I'll now pass it over to my colleague Taps to unpack the potential impacts of BRICS initiatives on the transaction banking industry. But before I do, I would ask that we could pull up the Slido and just get your opinions on what you think the opportunities might be.
Thank you, James. So today I'll walk you through the potential impact of the BRICS initiatives on the transaction banking landscape. So as you can see from the slide, the first potential impact is reduced US dollar dominance amongst trade between BRICS countries, which are ushering the emergence of new FX corridors and local currencies to settle these trades between BRICS countries. We may also see alternative payment rails through the use of distributed ledger technology as well as blockchain, which will obviously require new compliance standards to account for these. In terms of trade finance, we may see new trade finance products, more trade finance products denominated in local currency, as well as the potential units, as well as a growth in localized trading hubs, particularly amongst the global south. In terms of liquidity and risk management, there'll be an increasing demand for hedging tools for these currencies for banks and clients to hedge their FX exposure, as well as a fragmentation in liquidity pools. From a regulatory and compliance perspective, we may see emergence of regional AML as well as KYC standards, which will increase the compliance burden as well as complexity for global transaction banks. And in terms of correspondent banking relationships, we may see new correspondent banking relationships to facilitate this intra-BRICS trade. And lastly, from a bank's perspective, banks may need to consider investments in new technology to account for some of these changes. I'll now hand it over to my colleague Sarai, who will conclude our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tabs. As we conclude today's presentation, one thing is clear. The global financial system is shifting, not through disruption, but through deliberate strategic steps. Initiatives like the bridge and concepts around the unit show growing interest in new models for cross-border finance, for mainly focusing on financial sovereignty, use of local currencies, and regional control. We can't deny that we are entering an era of coexisting systems where influence is becoming more distributed and at the same time more contested. This is exactly where industry leaders and BAFT are stepping in. By including BRICS as a topic in this year's program, BAFT has shown the importance of thoughtful, proactive engagement. What is evident in this? It is the fact that we should treat BRICS initiatives with the same level of focus that we give to other major topics in transaction banking. Now, it's time to look forward. Your contribution as the industry leaders here in this room will be fundamentally important for setting global standards, enabling collaboration, and guiding sector through and risk and opportunities. The future isn't fixed, but how we respond and how we lead will definitely shape it. Before closing off, we encourage you to visit BAFT's website and check our extensive white paper. It will give you an in-depth understanding around the Union and two important initiatives that my friends has mentioned in this presentation. Last but not the least, let us end this session with some open questions that we should consider going forward about BRICS. Will global partners trust the institutions behind BRICS initiatives? Will corporations and banks rewire their infrastructure to accommodate and adopt them? And most importantly, can BRICS countries convince the world that the alternatives are reliable, secure, and in everybody's mutual interests? We don't have definite answers for these questions yet, but we know that they remain important considerations in shaping the future. Now it's time to thank for listening us. Now I'm heading to my friends on the stage for the Q&A session. Maybe Tabs, you can take the first question.
Thank you, Sarai. So I think one of the first questions is, you mentioned the BRICS bridge and the unit are there. Are there any other major initiatives currently being developed under the BRICS framework? So I believe there's four major BRICS initiatives. The first is the New Development Bank. This is a multilateral development bank headquartered in Shanghai, China, primarily focused on financing infrastructure projects in BRICS member countries. It's been in operation for the last 10 years. The second initiative is the Contingent Reserve Arrangement, which is essentially a safety net for BRICS countries that might be facing balance of payment crises. The third one is the BRICS Exchange. This allows BRICS countries to exchange soft commodities in local currency. And then the fourth one is BRICS Pay, which is a retail payments platform to facilitate trade amongst BRICS countries. Thank you.
Maybe we can, because we are running out of time, we will take just another question. What percentage of the world's GDP and global GDP population and global GDP is represented by BRICS members? So together, BRICS members amount around 55% of world's population and 42% of world's GDP. These economic indicators, they tell the significance and the importance that this alliance has. As for the other questions, some of them we mentioned also in our paper. Therefore, we would like to encourage you to read it once it's available in the BAFT website. Thank you so much for listening to us.